I'm looking forward to talking to you about some lesser known places, maybe even some in better known places, but lesser known places to visit, even in the bigger, better known cities and towns. So I like to start with one that I think I don't have to tell you where this is. You're all travelers. That's Florence. Actually took that photo from a kind of back street walk up to San Miniato al Monte, but that's not what I really want to talk about this morning. I want to talk about two places in Florence that I really enjoy visiting, even during the high season, even when it's hot and crowded and the Uffizi has a massive line out front. You can visit these two places I've highlighted there with circle and an arrow: the Museo San Marco and the Palazzo d'Avanzati. So the place we'll start with is the Palazzo d'Avanzati, which was built in the 1200s, and it's significant architecturally because it shows a transition from the medieval tower houses, where there are many in Florence, in Siena, all around Tuscany, and in Volterra as well, where Francesco lives. But this one is a transition between that period of the tower house and what would become the kind of the manor house or palazzo in the cities. That top loggia there at the very top, that was actually constructed in the 1500s. So in the Renaissance time, it would have had medieval battlements. So, you know, times were tough in these Florentine among these Florentine people and in the different Italian cities. And so there were great fortifications, even in the homes, which is why people lived in towers and had battlements on top of their houses. But the interior is lavishly decorated, as you can see on the right-hand side there. Frescoed bedrooms, very comfortable. You can see a crib. You can see the fireplace. This is a palazzo that really gives you an opportunity to walk back in time and see how people, the very wealthy, the very 0.01% of people were able to live. This is a courtyard that in the center there, you might be able to see, has a little drain, but that would go to a cistern. But you can also see on that back wall, I'll highlight it with my arrow, you can even see some ceramic drain pipes and stairs leading up to the upper floors where the family lived. You get a sense of the kitchen, what kind of implements would have been used, and also even a very rare medieval toilet. Very, very unusual to have indoor plumbing at this time. So it really gives you a sense of what life was like for the very wealthy in the Middle Ages. Now, the next place I'd like to take you to is kind of on the opposite side of the historic town, and that's the Museo San Marco, which was built in the 1430s. It's a convent or monastery, and you can see the little windows up here on the second floor. Here, this photo is taken in the interior courtyard, and it's really, even today, kind of a respite from the hustle bustle crowds, and it's right around the corner from the Statue of David at the Accademia. Now, here gives you another sense of that kind of a pathway around the center courtyard. But what San Marco is really known for are its frescoes by Fra Angelico, who was not a high Renaissance painter, but a mid-Renaissance painter. He was a member of this monastery and a very well-known Renaissance painter. He decorated each of the cells in this monastery with wonderful frescoes, such as this one of the Kiss of Judas. They had a very, excuse me, a couple of very famous residents at this monastery. One was Cosimo il Vecchio de' Medici. He had two cells in this monastery, and you can see a fresco here of the Adoration of the Magi. Another famous resident was Savonarola, but he was a very austere monk, not one who wanted to really show off lavishly or anything. So his cell is not so nicely decorated. Now we're moving on to our next place, and I don't know, you don't have to put your hand up or yell out or put anything in the text box, but just take a minute or a second and think about where this is. Now we're in Tuscany. There's a river. Okay, those palaces on either side kind of look like what we were in Florence, but we're not in Florence. We're in Pisa. Now, Pisa, obviously, Florence and Pisa, very well-known places, but I want to tell you a little bit about Pisa. I do this among my guide colleagues because we all kind of like to not like Pisa so much. There are some Tuscan historical reasons there, which Francesco's probably laughing about right now about Pisans. But also it's mostly known, obviously, for its Leaning Tower, its crowds, its kitschy tourism. But Pisa is a really great entry point into the Tuscany area. They have a great airport that has a longer runway than Florence and can actually take transatlantic flights. And during the high season, you can fly directly from the US directly into Pisa and then take this fantastic, super modern people mover right from the airport to the train station. So you could fly into Pisa and then take a train out to Florence, or fly into Pisa and get in your rental car and start your Tuscan journey right there from Pisa. But Pisa is obviously extremely well known for its Leaning Tower. This is the Campo dei Miracoli. We have over here the baptistry, we have the cathedral, and we have the tower. But you may not have ever seen this view. This view is in the Museo del Duomo, the Museum of the Duomo that holds the Duomo, or the cathedral's kind of most prized possessions. And you can see, I actually took this photo. I'm kind of proud of it. It has my Aperol Spritz and my husband's Negroni here. And we're having an aperitivo at the Museo del Duomo in this wonderful cafe overlooking a beautiful green courtyard and a fantastic view of the Campo dei Miracoli, all included in a combo ticket that gets you into everything else on the Campo dei Miracoli. So if you do go to Pisa, I highly, highly recommend the Museo del Duomo, and not just for its treasures, but also its fantastic cafe, right with a beautiful view. Now, Pisa was originally a Roman maritime power and then became a medieval power. And in the Middle Ages, the University of Pisa was founded. Now, a lot of you aren't thinking, oh, I want to go visit a college town, but Pisa is a fantastic college town even today. Founded in 1343, it was a place where Galileo taught, also Fibonacci of the Fibonacci sequence taught at the University of Pisa. And it's a very lively place. If you get away from that Campo dei Miracoli and move into the streets and then to the piazzas of the town, here I took this photo at Halloween. You'll see lots of students everywhere eating, drinking, just like college students do everywhere. Now, getting back to the Middle Ages in Pisa, Pisa was a power before Siena and long before Florence. Pisa became a power because of its connection with the sea. It was one of the 4 ancient maritime republics of Italy, and it really rose to prominence after the sack of Palermo. And that's when the cathedral in the main square there, the Campo dei Miracoli, was built. This church was actually built a little bit earlier than that. It's the oldest church in Pisa, and it is really my favorite church, and there's hardly ever anyone in there. So I highly recommend to stop at Chiesa di San Sisto from 1087. Now, it has some wonderful little architectural elements. If you just walk around it, you can see these plates called bacini, or bowls called bacini, that were taken from the Muslim areas of Western Mediterranean and also Northern Africa. They were brought back not so much as spoils of war, but as symbols of the great trading relationship because of that fantastic navy that the Pisans had. Not only did they transport crusaders, but they also transported a lot of goods, spices, people, services back and forth around the Mediterranean. Inside this church, another element that I want to point out that's fantastic are these columns. This was a Roman city. And so we have columns that were taken from ancient Roman temples that were reused in this medieval church. Now, I took this photo. It's a very dark church, but this you might not actually recognize what it is. This is a rudder from a ship from the 1300s, spoils of war from one of those great maritime battles, but it's been stored here in this church of San Sisto, just to show the connection between the church and the town itself. So Pisa really has these kind of little nice nooks and crannies, great medieval city. Now, because it really rose to prominence, and because art requires money, any town that was really rising to prominence or wanted to really show off its wealth started building cathedrals, started hiring artists and artisans. And so in Pisa, we have a lot of wonderful world-class medieval art. This is in the Museum of San Matteo. Now, into the San Matteo Museum, which is a national medieval museum, you will probably be the only person on a single floor. But in here is one room that, if you are at all interested in medieval art, is absolutely worth the cost of admission. And I'd say even the plane ticket over. What it shows you here is the greatest collection of crucifixes from the Middle Ages ever put together in one room. And what we see here are the earliest representations of Christ on the cross. He's Christ in triumph. His eyes are open. He's looking triumphant over death. And then we move over here to the right, where we start just on the edge of the Renaissance movement of much more realism. And you see this kind of curved S shape of Christ's body, and he's slumping down on the cross. So it's a really wonderful transitional moment that you get to see here in Pisa. Now, going back even further in time, if you're interested in ships, if you're interested in the Romans at all, there is a museum that was just opened a few years ago, the Museo delle Navi Antiche, which means the ancient ships. Because Pisa is in kind of an alluvial plain and the soil is very easily deformable, and because, rivers tend to move around, well, these ships back in the Roman period, so we're probably talking about 1st, 2nd century AD, they were trapped or capsized and got buried in the mud. And just like in Venice, when you get wood that's submerged underneath mud, it's an anaerobic environment, it gets preserved. And so you can go into this wonderful naval museum, which again will have very, very few people in it. All right, now off to more of the hinterlands, Arezzo. Arezzo was originally an Etruscan town. It became certainly a medieval trading center. It became a city, an outpost of the great Florentine dukes who built a fortress there. Arezzo is over here on the very eastern side of Tuscany. Here's a map. We have Florence up at the top. There's Siena, just to give you some perspective. Pisa would be way over here to the left, and here's Arezzo, all the way to the east. Now, Arezzo is one of its great features is its Piazza Grande, which is extremely picturesque, lovely to have a nice meal. It was also the site where the film Life is Beautiful by Roberto Benigni was filmed. And it's also the site where the largest antiquarian and antique market in Italy is held the first Sunday of every month. So you could join Italians, take the train down from Florence, or drive over to Arezzo and spend a nice day there. Now, moving on to really kind of the jewel in the crown of Arezzo, and no visit to Arezzo would be complete without a stop at the Basilica di San Francesco, is to see the fresco cycle. A cycle is a series of frescoes. The Legend of the True Cross. Now, the True Cross is the wood of the Christ, of the cross on which Jesus was crucified. This is by Piero della Francesca in the mid 1400s. Now, many of you may not have ever heard of Piero della Francesca, but he was someone who was an early adopter of single point perspective. He was a follower of the greats like Brunelleschi, but he got a bit overshadowed by guys like Botticelli and then later Michelangelo. A lot of people have never heard of him, but he has a wonderful fresco cycle here that was actually featured in the film The English Patient. If you've seen that film, maybe you'll remember this scene where Juliette Binoche, if I can get this to actually work, and maybe I won't, she was hoisted up and kind of taken on a tour of this. And I'm sorry that it's not working, but the reason that they were able to film this is because that fresco cycle was under restoration. That's what I meant. Sorry. Here it is. Lovely. What an amazing opportunity for Juliette Binoche to be able to see the frescoes like that. It's incredible to me that they allowed flares to be that close. But it was under restoration, so they allowed the producers of the film to film in this chapel. All right. So up close and in more detail, we see a couple of Piero della Francesca's individual panels, the Dream of Constantine on the left and the Annunciation to the Virgin on the right. Now, I'm not going to get too far into the weeds in terms of Renaissance art history, but this is in the art history textbooks because of Piero della Francesca's use of foreshortening here with this angel, and also the wonderful light and shadows. This is mid 1400s. Keep in mind that Michelangelo, for a point of reference, was not born until 1475. So this is 25 years before the birth of Michelangelo, just to give you a reference. And here we can see a kind of classic Renaissance organization here, very geometric, and showing each of the characters, God the Father here with the angel Gabriel and Mary on the right, each in their own quadrant, very mathematically designed, very classically Renaissance in terms of its rationality. Now, I mentioned that Arezzo has this wonderful Medici fortress, which today is a park with ramparts that you can walk inside, and also some great park-like spaces, take a picnic up there. And in Italy, unlike the United States, it's okay to have a bottle of wine outside in a public park. It's probably quite welcomed, really. Now, moving on to something a little less cerebral is the what they call the Le Cascate di Mulino. A mulino is a mill. This is the mill, and this is a cascate, a waterfall. And as you can imagine, this is a hot springs that deposits minerals that have built up over time. And you can see it is open to the public. It's located near the town of Saturnia, which is in very, very far southern Tuscany. You can see Lake Bolsena here. This is right near Orvieto in Umbria, where our colleague David Tordi lives. So this is very far south in the Maremma, which is where David is going to be which is where Francesca is going to be talking about in a few minutes. But this Saturnia, the temperature of the water is 99 degrees. It's lovely to go there on a cool, early morning when the steam is coming off. Doesn't cost anything to go there. You can spend as much time as you want. You just have to get there because it's a little bit remote and off the beaten track, but well worth the trip. Now, this hot spring was originally, well, not originally, but it was originally used by the Etruscans, and then the Romans came along and used this hot spring and established the town of Saturnia. Saturn, as you probably know from your Roman mythology, was a god, and they're a Roman god. And there's a medieval legend that says that the springs of Saturnia were born in the exact point where Jupiter, the king of the gods, his thunderbolt fell in a battle against Saturn. And the scars left by the thunderbolt were the portals to hell, and that's why there was the steamy, smelly water gushing out. But it's much more pleasant, relaxing place than what the medieval people actually thought. So now we move off into the bucolic, gorgeous Chianti countryside in the town of Panzano. Again, many of you may not ever have heard of the town of Panzano, but gorgeous there in the fall, which is when I like to do my tours. Panzano is a beautiful little hill town. It was one that was fought over it's located between Siena and Florence, and it's located just over a valley called the Conca d'Oro. Now, this is one of the most picturesque viewpoints in all of the Chianti countryside. It was called the Conca, which is shell, Conca d'Oro meaning gold, because in the past they used to grow corn, which you can imagine was not native to Italy, but they used to grow corn there, and it became golden as it ripened. And so they named this valley, which is obviously very fertile even today with its vineyards. They called it the Conca d'Oro. But this Panzano is located, I found a Google map that had kind of a Chianti Classico region driving route here, and Panzano is there right in the middle to give you that sense of where we are. Siena is here, Florence is here, and Panzano, you can see, is right in the middle between the two. Now, Florence and Siena, since the Middle Ages, were battling each other constantly, and so Panzano was a great outpost, and it traded hands many, many times during those Florentine Sienese wars. Here's the city center. I took this photo here of the city center of Panzano. You can see strong connection with Chianti, large bottle there. A beautiful little church, not really that old, but you can see cyclists love these driving routes and this gorgeous scenery. And beautiful back streets. This is kind of what you picture in a lovely Tuscan hill town. Gorgeous outdoor restaurants with a view, or you can go and visit a restaurant which is very well known in Italy. You can go have lunch with this guy, Dario Cecchini, who is a rock star celebrity butcher. You know, the Italians are all about food, all about wine, and Francesca's going to talk to you about wine in this region. But look at the size of this cut of meat here. Look at the size of these steaks. He is probably the world's only celebrity butcher. And so you can enjoy lunch. He always makes an appearance at lunch. And I found this quote, which is a riff on Dante. And it says, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter, for you are in the hands of a butcher." That was on his homepage of his website for his restaurant. So now at this point, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague and friend, Francesco. I went to Cecchini's restaurant the first time with Francesco, and you can see here he is with his bottles of wine, anticipating the lovely meat that he's going to have with Dario Cecchini. So some of these places are going to be on my Tuscan Harvest Tour, which is in very early November. We will definitely go to Dario Cecchini's, even if you're vegetarian. He does have a vegetarian plate, so don't be afraid. But we will also visit the town of Arezzo, And we will not be, we will be staying in the town of Siena, but those are more well-known places. So if you're interested in my itinerary of my Tuscan harvest tour, it's at my website, and I do have spaces available for that. And if you're interested, if you decide to sign up based on your attendance at our talk today, I'll give you a $200 discount. Just write in the discount code Undiscovered, and then I'll know that you are at this talk. So thanks a lot. I'm going to turn it over to Francesco, and I'll be around for questions later. Thanks, everyone.